Lightbearers, Treasure in Fragile Vessels. Take 1, by Elliot Dillon. Dreamer, Chapter 5. When the boys didn't answer, the man screamed, "Who are you?" "We're just runaways," replied Seth. "Please don't hurt us. We'll leave, we promise." Grabbing a hold of Ezekiel's shirt, the man pulled him closer so he could look into his eyes. The man's own eyes narrowed as he seemed to peer into the teen's very soul. "You look a little too clean to be a runaway." "He is new," offered Seth. "We were just trying to avoid the watchers above. We didn't know these tunnels were yours." "Can't you read? I have signs everywhere." "I can't," admitted the boy. Ezekiel added his claim that he couldn't either, which was true, as everything was written in an alien script. The man didn't seem to buy their claims as he raised the sword to Ezekiel's neck. In the dim light coming through the latter's escape, he noticed an etching in the blade near the hilt. Whatever had been written in the blade had since faded away, as only parts of the lines of the text remained. It reminded him of Noah's sword and the pieces he'd seen with etchings. "Where did you get that sword?" asked Ezekiel, his curiosity taking over in his panicked state. "I've always had this," admitted the man. "I grew up with it. It's my light." "Your light could use a little polishing." Past the man, Ezekiel caught sight of Noah, who was pushing a rat's body aside with the heel of her shoe. "As it is, it just looks like a rage mask's blade." The man looked angry as he took the blade of his sword away from Ezekiel's neck and pointed it at her. "Who are you? These are my tunnels. Can't you read?" The girl shrugged, indicating that even if she did, his signs meant nothing to her. "If you knew me, you know a sign has never stopped me from doing anything." With an angered growl, the man lunged at her, meeting his blade with her own. "Get out! Once I get my friends, we'll be on our way." He swung his sword wide around his head, bringing it around to her right as she deftly blocked it. "They trespassed." "So did I, and you're going to let me go?" He made a low swing, which she blocked with the side of her sword. "No, I'm not." "You are very confusing." She dodged his next attack, which gave her a position behind him as she kicked him, so that he stumbled forward, tripping over the rat that she'd recently moved, which knocked him the rest of the way to the ground. While he was struggling to get back up, Noah leapt toward the two boys, who had paused on the ladder to watch her. "Up!" At the command, Noah continued to climb as she pushed Ezekiel's bottom in a signal for him to move as well. Below them, he heard the tunnel man growl as he ran toward them. Before he had reached the bottom rung of the ladder, Noah shifted over a manhole cover to close the tunnel, then ordered the boys to follow her as they ran away before the man had a chance to follow. When they were sure they had escaped the man, Noah let them catch their breath in an overgrown backlot. "What were you thinking?" asked Noah, directing the question to Seth. The boy looked chagrined as he dropped his head. "I'm sorry. I was showing off. I know now's not the time to play around." "You've got that right. When we get home, I'm telling—" She made the sound of the stand-in mother's name. "And she'll deal with you." This really seemed to upset the boy, so Ezekiel cut in to defend him. "Hey, he's just a kid. He can't help but want to have some fun every now and then. Where's the harm in that?" Noah looked torn between wanting to tell him off and give in to his want to let the boy go. In the end, she chose the first as she told him. "The harm is he could lose his life. That man in the tunnel wasn't just threatening you. He wouldn't have hesitated to use his sword on you like he did those Cappies. This is a dangerous time, Ezekiel, and we all have to be on our guard on all fronts." With that, she had them follow her back to the hiding place, where the woman greeted them with a worried look as she and Noah discussed something in their alien language. Once Noah had informed the woman of Seth sneaking away, the adult gave the child the task of changing the toddler's children's diapers. "Ah, come on," lamented the boy as he was pulled away by a girl who looked to be a few years older than him. "As for you," stated the woman as she turned on Ezekiel. Before she could give him a punishment, Noah stepped in between them. "It's okay. I'll take care of him." Frowning, the woman let out a sigh as her expression became softer. "All right. Just remember there are more lives at stake than just yours. We can't be making any more mistakes." "I know." When she was out of ear range, Ezekiel let us snort, which got a confused look from Noah. "Who does she think she is thinking she can boss me around? I'm not one of her adopted kids." Noah looked torn again as she told him, "Don't be so hard on her. These kids are like her own flesh and blood. Most all of them are orphans, and those that aren't were abandoned by their parents. It's been hard on all of them, but they're getting by, and I know in the end it will all be worth it." "How?" "Because the worse it gets, the closer we know it is to the source is coming." "How's that?" "That's what he says. In the Book of Light, we are told what it will be like in the end, just before he comes. The false ruler is already on his throne, and people are losing their lives for the sake of the light. It won't be much longer." Looking from her to the children, who were all covered in grime, he had to agree that if things had to get worse before they got better, they were close. But then, he thought, who wants to have to experience all this pain before they feel joy? If he had a choice in the matter, he'd much rather live comfortably than in squalor. As Noah left him to go on another chain run, Ezekiel found Seth, who was pinching his nose with one hand as he tried to change diapers with the other. "It really makes things harder when you only have one hand," stated the boy as he finally finished his task, "but smelling it is so much worse." Off to the side, Ezekiel spotted an old etching in the building's wall that resembled the spoke of a wagon. Seeing the image reminded him of his conversation with Seth earlier as he asked, "Is Wheels really dead?" The boy was silent for a time, a memory causing him to sigh with great sadness as he replied, "We called him Wheels because he'd been in an accident. Though he'd survived, he always felt angry at the source for not having healed him completely. Then he got it into his head that if he could prove his worthiness to the source by mounting an attack against the false ruler, his legs would be restored." The boy grew quiet again before finishing the story by saying, "That's when we lost him and most of all the adults that had been with us." Looking around the room, he noted how few grown-ups there were in comparison to children. "Why can't you just run away to another city or place where the false ruler isn't in power?" "Because he's basically in power everywhere. There would be nowhere to run to. This is just the city where he decided to have his castle built. But the book says the true source's kingdom is not built by man's hands, and that it will come down from the sky. You guys sure know quite a bit about a book that's supposedly lost. Why do I have to find it?" "It's not really lost, it's just been misplaced. But there were those who filled their minds with its light before it was taken from us, and once it is found, its light will shine even brighter on those who seek it." He did not understand what the boy meant, but nodded as if he did. He was tired again, and as it was nearing what passed for night on the planet, he had his small meal, then headed off to sleep. Maybe in the morning he'd understand things better, but he doubted it. In a world with cowboy pirates, he doubted he'd ever really understand anything. Speaker, Chapter 7. "You're grounded," stated Elijah's father, the next morning when he came down for breakfast. "For what?" asked the teen. "Your school called," replied his mother. "They said you just walked out in the middle of the day." "With some girl," added his brother with an amused smile. He winked at his brother as if to say congratulations. "Who was it?" asked his father. As Elijah really didn't know himself, he answered, "Just some girl." "Do we know her?" asked his mother. "No." "What's her name?" He started to reply he didn't know, but remembered she had finally told him. "Jean." "Where did you meet her?" He thought about it, then answered, "On the street." He could tell this wasn't the best answer, as his mother looked sick, while his father looked infuriated. His brother, on the other hand, looked even more pleased. "The street? It's not what you think. And what do you think I think? She just followed me one day when I was out, and I ran into her a few times after that. But she's just some weird girl with a penchant for finding me." "Do we need to call the police?" inquired his mother worriedly. "No, she's harmless. At least, he hoped so." "Why would you do this?" asked his father. "You know what could happen by going down this road. Look at your brother." The man motioned to the older boy, who replied with a curt, "Hey!" "He almost lost everything he'd worked for when he got that Mitchell girl pregnant, and now you're going down the same path." "I'm not. Things are not like that. She's just—" He almost said a mouthpiece for the source, but knew his parents wouldn't like that any more than anything he'd said up till then. "It was just a one-time thing." He moved to assurance, as he stated something he was pretty sure was a fact. "I won't be seeing her ever again." Though his parents looked doubtful, they let him leave with a warning. "But please don't disappoint us," added his mother, as he walked out the door. Resolving not to, he started down the street to school, only to find Jean waiting for him at the bus stop. "Have you given it any thought?" was written on the notebook when she handed it to him. Shoving it back at her, he shook his head. "I can't. I have other responsibilities. Besides, I'm not really sure that you're not just some wackadoodle with some weird psychotropic drugs." She let out a heavy sigh before writing something on the page. Before she could hand it to him, the bus arrived and he got on. As he sat down, she hurried over, squeezing into the seat before the person ahead of her could. "Hey!" called the woman, to which she gave an apologetic look. Before the person could walk away with an annoyed huff, she reached out, grabbing onto her arm so that she stopped. "What?" "He does care. He always has." Surprised at hearing her talk, Elijah was about to comment on it when the woman's phone began to ring. Pulling it out, she looked surprised as she heard the person on the other line. Tears filled her eyes as she took in a shaky breath. Not even taking the time to answer whoever had spoken, she hurried back down the aisle as she called to the driver to wait. "I have to get off. My son's home. He was overseas, but he's finally come home." Getting out, she hurried back down the street toward her home and her waiting son. Looking back at the girl, Elijah couldn't help but be amazed by what he'd just seen. What was that? Why were you just suddenly able to talk then? Reverting back to writing, she wrote her reply. Some of the source's messages are for individuals. That woman had been praying for her son to arrive home safely and had started to become worried that he didn't care about her concerns. That though he'd answered prayers about wars and other larger things, he wasn't so personal as to be concerned about individuals. But now she will have this memory to get her through much worse times when it seems even more as though the source has abandoned her. But he has not. He has not abandoned any of us. He cares about every one of us, and nothing is too small to not be important to him. We must all remember this, especially as the end draws near. Her expression became tense as she looked him in the eyes, then pointed to the page where she had written, "And it is coming. The time for preparation is drawing to a close. I know you were worried that you were not ready to spread the light, but I felt the same way. I wanted to just spread the light through my actions and be a silent witness, but the source had a message for me to give. Like the speakers of old, who hoped to just change the world through their actions, they found they had a higher calling. The source moved them to rebuke the darkness of the people and their leaders, and even when they tried to remain silent, they could not help but preach the plain utterances of the book. Even the reformers of old were reluctant at first, but as they were compelled by the light, they were filled with a zeal to do the source's work, to warn of the danger that awaited those in darkness." She turned the page as she continued to write. "We need not to fear those of the world, but to proclaim the light no matter the consequences. If we will let the source make us willing, he will send his spirit so the words we say will compel those around us to change. The light must shine forth before it is too late. Will you help me?" Under the question she had written yes and no and handed him the pen to circle his response. As he stared at the page, he realized he had no need to circle the answer. He could just tell her. Turning to do just that, he found that she was no longer sitting beside him, and when he looked around the bus, he found she was gone. How did she do that? Gazer, Chapter 6. At lunch, Jeremiah's friend informed him his mother was making him quit martial arts. "She's afraid it's going to excite my seizures. Have you had another one?" "No. Medication seems to be helping, but they say it's not 100%. So, if I start talking funny, keep an eye on me." "That's no help. You always talk funny." Brian laughed as he took a bite of his mashed potatoes. "What about you? You still having visions of that wasteland world? You know, it sounds totally Mad Max, especially with those bikers." "I know. I really wish I would just stop. It's wearing me out. Sometimes I think I can even hear them." "Really? What are they saying?" "I don't know. I mean, when I hear it, I don't understand what they mean, and then later, when I try to remember what they said, I can't recall. It's really weird. I'm kind of scared." "Hey, if I had a choice in who to lose my mind with, I would totally choose you." "Thanks. But could you not?" His friend laughed. "Sorry. You're my first and only choice." Jeremiah laughed as he replied sarcastically, "Thanks. Hey, do you want to go to the shopping mall after school today? I really want to check out the new gear they've got in at the martial arts store." "Why? It's not like you can use any of it." "Does that stop you from browsing?" His friend had a point. "All right, that's cool." When school had ended, they met up at their lockers, then headed outside where they walked together toward the shopping center. "I was thinking..." Jeremiah interrupted him as he said, "Careful, man, don't hurt yourself." Brian laughed. "No, seriously. About those portals. Have you ever tried approaching them?" "Are you crazy?" "No. Why wouldn't you try going up to them and seeing if you can't touch them?" "Because I don't want to." "Why?" "It might give you a clue into if they're something you're just imagining, or if they're real." "They're not real." "What if they are?" Jeremiah shook his head, but indulged his friend as he said, "And if they are, why would I want to touch them?" Brian shrugged. "For science." Arriving at the martial arts store, the old shop owner greeted them, giving Brian his condolences on his early retirement. "You are an excellent fighter. The craft will miss you." "Thank you, Mr. Yao." Leaving the boys to shop, the owner came back a little later with a box in his hands. I know it's a little too late, but your gloves came in. Taking the box, Brian looked at it with an expression of regret and disappointment. Trying to cheer his friend up, Jeremiah patted his arm as he said, Hey, maybe your mom will reconsider. As long as you stay away from hits to the head, she might be okay with the idea of you getting some kind of exercise. Nah, I wouldn't want to risk it. I still have a lot of other stuff I want to do before I die. Like what? Meet a cute Asian girl. Get cute Asian girl to accept a date with me. Convince Asian girl I'm the only guy for her, and then get her to accept my marriage proposal. Jeremiah laughed at his friend's single focus, as if, hey, it could happen. Thanking the old man, they headed outside, where they walked together back to Brian's house. At the door, his friend stopped as he looked at Jeremiah. Holding out the box to him, he said, Here, I want you to have these. Dude, these are even more worthless to me. You know my mom won't let me learn to fight. Besides, he pushed the box back. I know you're going to fight again. Don't lose hope. Smiling, Brian thanked him as he took the gloves back. Turning to head inside, he stopped as he asked, Did you want to see them? Opening the box, Jeremiah looked in at what looked like a regular pair of black mixed martial arts gloves. The gloves were fingerless, with extra padding on the knuckles and back of the hand. On the palm, the gloves only had a cross-section of leather that went across the midsection of the palm, then down from that section along the middle of the palm to the wrist. I thought you said these gloves were custom. They look like the gloves Mr. Yao sells on the shelves. Dude, use your eyes. Pointing to the strap, which tightened the gloves at the wrist, he pointed out a design of a bomb with a burning charge. What's that supposed to be? A bomb? Like Brian, the bomb. Come on, man. Jeremiah shrugged as he replied, I've never heard anyone call you that. They would have, if I'd gone professional. Lame. You come up with something better. I totally could. Then do it. Brian the Blimp. What? That doesn't even make any sense. And what fighter would want that for a nickname? One that's especially large? As the two friends argued over what would be the best fighting name, Jeremiah caught sight of the two bikers through the looking glass. We're almost there, he heard the girl say to the man. Just a little bit closer. Speaker, Chapter 8. Man, I wish I could have been there. Elijah tuned back into his friend's words, just as they entered their first class of the day. What? Have you not been listening to me? No, sorry. His friend looked distraught as he let out a groan before restating his story. There was this wacko at the South Street Sanctum going on about all this stuff. Some people even say she started making these visions appear of people made out of light and crumbling buildings and weird vines. It was crazy. Hearing that other people had seen the same things made Elijah less sure if Jean had somehow drugged him. But then, her drug could have been powerful enough to affect a few other people. Or maybe they were all in on the charade. How do you know this wasn't some kind of marketing scheme? Asked Elijah, even though he doubted this was the case. I don't know, man. Pastor Reeves was pretty upset by it all. Some people say he changed every shade of purple when he was debating with her. He wouldn't have been so upset if it had been something their sanctum had set up. But what about some other place? Couldn't someone else have done it in order to discredit them? Not likely. Some of the people that saw the visions were long-standing members. I don't know why they would be in on that kind of sabotage. In the end, Elijah was left with more questions than answers, but told himself he'd just have to get over it. He was done with the mute girl, and nothing was going to entice him to follow her again, not even if she was the last person on earth. Did you want to come back to the sanctum with me? Asked his friend. Knowing she'd probably be there, and never really wanted to go back even if she wasn't, he told his friend no. That's cool. Hey, why don't we go to the mall today and check out the girls? Remembering how the outdoor mall had been the first place he'd run into her, he dismissed this idea as well. Then what do you want to do? You know how you've been wanting to go to that new restaurant downtown? The one you say is ridiculously far away but isn't really? Yeah, why don't we go there? At these words his friend perked up, as he started to go on about how delicious the food was going to be, and how cute the waitresses were. I promise, Eli, you won't regret it. Those words should have been a hint, but he didn't have time to think about his friend's choice of words when he heard his name called from the front. "Elijah, would you come up here and work out this problem for us?" The whole class heard his breathing as he inhaled and exhaled through his nose rapidly while making his way to the front. Gripping the marker with his hands, already drenched with sweat, he did his best not to pass out as the numbers in front of him swam. Telling himself to take it easy, you've got this, he raised the marker to write the answer, then set it back down before heading back to his seat. Just as he started to calm himself down, he heard the teacher say at the front, "Would anyone else like to come up and solve the problem?" He heard the class snicker as he looked up to find that under the question he'd written the word "speak." He slumped down in his chair as another student headed to the front. Dreamer, Chapter 6. Ezekiel! He was walking down a set of metal rods that reminded him of train tracks. The ground was uneven and he stumbled a few times, but still he kept walking, as if he couldn't stop, as if a force outside himself was driving him forward. He had a purpose, and it must be fulfilled, either for good or for... Ezekiel! Time seemed to skip ahead as he found himself looking at a building with a dome roof, of which half of the dome had fallen away. He stared at the building for a moment, noting the flock of night marchers which buzzed around the structure. They looked as threatening as the first time he'd spotted them, and sent a cold chill down his spine as one suddenly turned to look at him. Ezekiel! He felt out of breath as he walked through a grove of trees which was overgrown with leaves and branches. Pushing through the verdant growth, he came upon a clearing in which he found a pond. Staring into the waters, the image before him confused him, as he did not find himself to be looking back at him, but... "Dreamer, wake up!" The call jolted him awake as he sat up, looking around at the waiting faces of the children and Noah. "Were you dreaming?" asked the girl with hesitant excitement. "I think so." He tried to recall the dream, but most of it had left his head. "All I remember is a set of steel rails." "Those are just outside," stated the adult woman to Noah, who nodded. "Then we'll head out that way." After eating a meager meal of dried fruit, the small group headed out of the large structure to a platform that fell off onto a set of metal tracks which were overcrossed with smaller metal beams. Together they headed down onto the tracks, where they stopped to look at Ezekiel as if to ask him which way to go. "Do you remember anything else?" "I remember building with a dome, but..." He closed his eyes and tried to picture the building, but found it coming across only faintly. "That's all I recall." The woman said a word which Noah nodded in agreement with. "We head that way," stated the girl as she pointed off down the metal tracks. The terrain was uneven, and Ezekiel found himself and others stumbling along as they made their way on the line of tracks. As they walked, he was surprised by how quiet the children were, remembering back to how noisy he'd been at their ages. "The children have had to learn fast that the safest sound is no sound," answered Noah when he asked her about their silence. After walking for several hours, they spotted the dome structure up ahead. On seeing it, something flickered at the back of his mind, but he couldn't get a firm hold of it as he remembered something about the building. "Is that the dome you were talking about?" asked Noah as she looked at him for guidance. Yeah, I think so, but there's something I'm not remembering." "Don't worry, it'll come to you. It always does." Turning to the rest of the group, she began to hug each of the kids, and then the adults as she said her goodbyes. "Wait, where are you going?" asked Ezekiel. "You can't leave us." She smiled, seeming amused at his not wanting her to go. "I'm not the only one leaving." Taking a hold of his hand, she pulled him away from the others as she waved in farewell to them. "I hope to see you all on the other side." They nodded, then turned away as they continued down the track, while he and Noah stepped off and started heading toward the dome. "Why aren't they coming with us?" "They have their own journey to take. Besides, our journey is way too dangerous for children." Ezekiel remembered how just that morning, no, it was yesterday now, he recalled how back on his world he had told his mother that he was no longer a child and could walk to school himself. At that moment, he wished he were still a child, so he would not have to go on this dangerous endeavor. Speaker, Chapter 9. Fred was beside himself with excitement as he checked his cell phone for the restaurant's burger of the day. Elijah had barely had time to gather up his things after school, before his friend had whisked him away to the bus that would take them downtown. He had been pensive at first in taking the bus, but when the girl did not appear he became more relaxed. There was no way she would find him all the way across town. On entering the restaurant, the two were greeted by a super cute hostess. The area was located in College Town, which Fred had reminded him over and over on their way, was filled with female co-eds. Co-eds who don't want anything to do with high schoolers, Elijah reminded his friend as the girls showed them to their table. Hush, let me live the dream. Fred smiled at the girl, who smiled pleasantly back, before telling them their waiter would be right with him. A moment later, as Elijah looked over the food options, he heard his friend gasp and looked up to find him staring out at the restaurant occupants. Man, I think I'm in love. Looking toward his friend's gaze, all he saw was a group of guys crowded around one point on the floor. This isn't another cheeseburger crush, is it? His answer was soon received, as the men parted to reveal a waitress, carrying a dish, on which a burger with all the fixings and plate decorations was situated. Looking back at his friend, he told him he was drooling as he went back to studying his menu. Another moment later, he felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see a white paper with the words, "Hi, I'm your waitress," written in scripty text that seemed eerily familiar. Raising his eyes from the paper, he was greeted with the bright smile of Jean, who looked beyond amused to see him. "Whoa, what's with this?" asked Fred, as he noticed the message. Turning the page in the notebook, it explained, "I've lost my voice, but I hope you won't mind me waiting on you." Casting a look back at the other waitresses, his friend seemed hesitant, as he considered the cuteness factors of all the other girls compared to Jean. While the mute girl was nice to look at, she was nowhere near the fantasy girl that Elijah knew his friend liked to stare at. "Just let her wait the table," stated Elijah, giving his friend a look like, "Grow up already." With a forlorn sigh, Fred agreed, as he reluctantly gave her his order. Once she'd gotten both their orders, she thanked them with a pre-written note, then headed back to the kitchen. "That was weird," stated Fred once she was gone. "Yeah," replied Elijah, as he stared after her. Rising, he told his friend he'd be right back. Bathroom. While Fred was distracted by a waitress, he hurried back in the direction he had seen Jean go, catching her just as she came out of the kitchen. "What are you doing here?" Motioning to her outfit, she gave him a look that told him, "I work here, duh." "How did you know I'd be here?" She shrugged, again indicating by her look alone, "I didn't." Unable to believe that she just happened to have a job this far out of the way from where she lived, he called her on this. Pulling out a notebook, she replied, "My college is near here. I would have gotten a job closer to home, but it didn't work out. I guess the source wants me in both places for now. But you're not going to college around here anymore." She shook her head. "There's too much to do, and once he tells me, I won't even be working here anymore." "And do you think your speaking is going to pay for your place?" "The source will provide." He doubted it, but their conversation was cut short as someone called for Jean. Heading back to his table, he barely heard anything his friend said, as he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe the girl was special, maybe even sent from the source. And if that was so, could he really refuse the work the source wanted for him? The next time Elijah saw Jean, the weather outside was practically a monsoon. He was coming home after a day out with Fred downtown, and had taken the bus in order to stay dry after the two had parted ways. Just as he took a seat, the girl boarded the bus, dressed in her work uniform and looking like a half-drowned cat. She did not sit near him, and seemed too distracted with her thoughts to notice him. Having a chance to just watch her and not have her in his face, he noticed for the first time how tired she looked. With a gray shade around her eyes that had nothing to do with eyeshadow, and clothes that looked 2 sizes too big, he realized how thin and tired she was. When he had stopped focusing on her physical appearance, he noticed that her eyes were closed, and her lips were moving as if she was talking to someone. Then he realized she was praying. Whatever she was praying about, her brow furrowed in a look of anxiety, and her lips were moving quickly as if she were having a debate with the source. Then as he watched her fold her hands together, he realized she was pleading with the source. As he watched, a person walked past and collided with the side of her seat, as he swayed about from an overabundance of liquid. Continuing on, the man did not seem to notice as he knocked the girl's bag onto the floor. Without thinking, Elijah knelt down to help her as she picked up the dropped items. Picking up a letter, his eyes were caught by the words, "Eviction Notice." Another paper was near the letter that gave Jean a notice of being laid off from her job within 2 weeks. "How do you do it?" She seemed surprised at seeing him, as she mouthed, "What?" "Trust the source with how little you have. How much have you sacrificed for him, and has he given you anything in return?" She smiled as she nodded, then mouthed the words, "Love. That can't be enough." Taking the letter from him, she wrote on the back of it, "I may not have everything I want, but I have everything I need with him, and he provides me with all my needs as I need them. I know things won't always make sense, and things will be hard, But he has a purpose for me, and I'm not going to let something like an eviction notice keep me from that. I have wondered at times why I ever started speaking, but then I remember the light of his words, and how they must be spread, and that gives me strength. A strength to continue spreading the light so others might realize the love he has for them, and the fact that he will always get them through, whether through hardships, pain, or death. He will always be there. But where are you going to stay? She shrugged. Do your parents live nearby? She wrote down, cemetery. Oh, I'm sorry. She smiled as if she was at peace with the death of both her parents. He knew she was a strange girl, but somehow she kept amazing him in a way that confused him. You don't have any friends or relatives you could stay with? The source will provide something. I take it that's a no. A thought plagued him as he helped her finish gathering her things. Noticing how she shivered from the cold and did not even have a jacket, he realized what he had to do. Taking off his coat, he put it over her shoulders and said, "You're coming with me."